Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another beat 'em up tutorial. Today we're going to be covering how to make bosses. So this is really exciting. This will allow you to add larger, more complex, and more intricate enemies to your game. Basically bosses, right? So how we're going to do this, I'm going to add some more sprites to the GitHub. So I will post the link down below so that you can re-download the stuff there. And that will include all the sprites we have here. So it includes the sprite of this guy falling, this guy looking like that, all of these sprites. They might be a little bit different. I'm going to change up the sprite a bit just so the sprites I'm giving away for free aren't the exact sprites I'm also using in my project. If you have played my beat 'em up game by now, then you know that this guy is like one for one the same boss as the one I have in my project. But what we're going to be doing today is just going to be taking all these sprites and we're going to create a boss enemy that spawns in, attacks you, has a few different attacks, so that's one of them. He can also punch you like that. And, whoops. We'll also set up the damage type stuff. So that's what we have here. So he's going to have a few attacks, and he's going to have some different damage types. So we're going to set all that up today. Alright, let's get right into it. So the first thing we need is we need all these sprites. Second thing we need is all of these sprites. These are the hitbox sprites for our various attacks. They're not too crazy. I'll be sure to include these as well. These are made the same way I made the other hitboxes for the other attacks. I believe I showed some of that process off in my other tutorials. But if you want, really all it is just making sure, like taking a sprite and then turning that sprite into a hitbox. It's just very simple stuff, right? So, next we need to tackle big guy. Alright, so big guy, basically what we want is we want something to work very similar to the enemy. So in this case, we're adding basically what is a brand new enemy to our game. So, unlike the other enemies, this big guy is going to have his own states. But he's still going to be a child of our enemy parent object. So I don't think I went over this in my previous tutorials, but basically, what do you do if you have multiple enemies in your game? We're going to open up our player real fast, and we're going to see that when we make our hitbox, generally what you should have right now is something that looks like this. So this right here, this is telling the hitbox, okay, check if you're colliding with this object, obj_enemy. However, we also want to make sure that we're also colliding with our obj big guy, our boss. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to use parents. So in your player object, you're going to want to change it to obj_enemy parent. obj_enemy parent for each hitbox, right? And then what we're going to do, I had 4 that I had to change here, so you're probably going to have to change 4 as well. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new object and call it the enemy parent. Here it is. So here's the enemy parent. As you can see, it has no sprites. It has absolutely nothing. However, if you click on this parent tab right here, you'll see that its parent is no object, and its children are obj_enemy and obj boss parent. So basically what happens is, in Gamemaker, you can use inheritance, which basically means that anytime you reference obj_enemy parent, you're also referencing all of its children. So it's like if you want to talk to the parent, then you are also going to talk to the parent's sons ever again. And so that's pretty simple. Another thing I've added here is this wave order. That variable carries down to all of the objects below it. So now obj_enemy has this variable in it, and obj boss parent has this variable in it. So next we're going to create obj_boss parent because you shouldn't have it yet. So create boss parent, and then you can add here objects obj boss parent. So create the boss parent, and then let's look what's in the boss parent. The boss parent is not very complex. There's literally nothing in this one. All it does is it marks obj underscore big guy as a boss. So the way I did it this way is we could reference the obj underscore enemy parent, in which case we'd be referencing all of the enemies in our game as well as all of the bosses. Or we could reference obj underscore boss parent, which in this case we could go in and create more bosses here, and we could reference all of the bosses in our game through this parent. So next, for the children, we're going to create obj underscore big guy. I know we did this a little bit out of order, but big guy should be at the very end of this pecking order. So as we can see, if we open up parents, we can see that obj underscore boss parent is this object's parent. So that means that when we check as the player, if we're colliding with obj underscore enemy parent, that means we're now also checking if we're colliding with our enemy objects or the boss parent. So good stuff. Alright, so what do we have here? So, first what we're going to do is we're going to establish some different states. So this big guy, he has a bit different animations. And generally when you make a state machine, you should create a state for each animation. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to do waiting, which is basically waiting before the enemy attacks. Enter the scene, fall and hit the ground, laying, hurt, idle, jump prep, jump up, slam down, punch, stand up, walk, whirl prep, whirlwind, whirl end, die, and then dead. So that's what we're going to have. And then the first state that we want to start off with is big guy states.waiting. Alright, next, top and bottom. So what this does is these variables keep the big guy constrained between two values. So as you can see, if we go here, if you look down here in the X and Y, 437 is about around here, and then 750 is about here at the end of the room. So basically, when we do the whirlwind state, we're going to use these two values to make sure that the big guy stays in this area, in these Y positions, essentially. Alright, is boss is equal to true. I think this variable is old, but I'm going to leave it in. No, I don't think we need it. Alright. My sprite. So we're going to animate this guy the same way we've done elsewhere in the tutorial. So my sprites. So waiting, fall, hit ground, fall, laying, hurt, idle, jump prep, jump up, slam down, punch, stand up, walk, whirl prep, whirlwind, whirl end. I also set the image speed to 0.5, which means that this character animates slightly slower, just so that the character looks like they're just moving a little bit slower. Shadow position, this doesn't actually get used in this tutorial, I'm sorry. Animation finished, so this is the same animation system that we're using elsewhere. My hitbox is equal to no one. We'll leave that. Attack to use. So this will basically, the big guy has 3 different attacks, and this variable is going to control which one he uses. Alright, next we have invincibility timer. Pretty basic stuff there. This is when the player hits this big guy. This will keep him invincible for a little while, just so that the player can't immediately hit him again. Alright, death timer. This is when he dies, how long he'll stick around on screen for. Alright, whirlwind code. So whirlwind hitbox is equal to no one. Whirlwind timer 125. So this basically controls the whirlwind state. Jump up code. Up speed, down speed. So this basically keeps an eye on, like, okay, how fast does the enemy move up and how fast does the enemy move down. I made them variables so that they're easier to play around with. Alright, grab state. We actually don't use this code either. My apologies. Alright, this is for a basic attack. Basically, same thing. This is to control the time spent in the basic attack state. Alright, idle code. This is when how long the big guy idles for. Alright, HP code. How much HP the bad guy actually has. Alright, behavior is equal to nothing. This is used very similarly to the whirlwind thing. So this will just sort of keep an eye on his behavior. This was more used in some of my other enemies. I don't believe we need it this time. So I'll just comment it out. Alright, VSP is equal to 0, anim X, anim Y, lay timer, blah 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 blah. So this just keeps a timer on how long the big guy lays down for. Now a note, we could use the timer constructor for this. There's nothing wrong with that. If you remember, we set that up last tutorial, I believe. But we aren't, just because when I originally made this code, it was before I had the timer set up. So this will just show you how to do it without the timer constructor, just as sort of like another option. So the die timer, again, this is just how long the enemy is on screen for when he dies. This is slightly different from the death timer, and we'll go over that once we actually get to that part of the tutorial. Alright, HSP, VSP, ZSP, MyZ, speed, jump speed. Similar stuff to what we have in our enemies and players. My friction, 1.5. Hurt to use, true. So this here isn't actually needed. We don't actually use it anywhere, so we can just delete that. That was for something for animation in my main project. Attacks connected, 0. I don't believe we use this either. This would just track how many attacks the big guy, how many of the big guy's attacks actually connect. So when you need that. Alright, get hurt. So the first thing we're going to do is face the attacker. This code is very similar to the code we have in other places in my project. Basically, the reason why I spent so much effort in setting up our enemies is so that whenever we want to add a new enemy, we can do it very simply. So you could just go over to your enemy objects and copy and paste in this same structure and then just edit it slightly for what we have changed here. So as you can see, if our HP is more than 0, and if we're not currently invincible, we are now currently invincible, and then we have to switch our damage type. So if we get punched, we take damage if we're not already hurt, already laying down, jumping up, standing up, we're in the whirlwind state, slam down, or die, or dead. If any of these states are true, then we won't do any of this code. Alright, so what does this do? Basically, what this does is our big guy is very tough, so he doesn't always show off the fact that he gets hurt. He doesn't always go to the hurt animation, right? So in the idle state and the walk state, yes, you can go to the hurt animation. Otherwise, don't go to the hurt animation. But we're always going to take damage, and we're always going to move back a little bit. Alright, good stuff. Thrown. So if you remember, this damage type is for like kicking and uppercuts, basically. And what I did is this character, he's very heavy. Like, he doesn't get thrown as far. But, you can always come back and change that. As you can see, these are the states where we shouldn't be allowed to be thrown. Very similar to the punch above. If so, we go to this fall hit ground effect, but only if we're coming from the idle or the walk state. Otherwise, take your damage and that's all. Alright, low kick, the last attack that the player has in their repertoire. If any of these states don't take damage, and then this is how much damage you take, and this is how far the this is how far the knockback is. Alright, and if there's for some reason some other effect that you take, just tell us as the developer, hey, this damage type isn't set up. Alright, and the last thing we're going to check is if our HP is less than or equal to 0, then we die. Alright, action punch. We're going to use this little function later when we want to make a punch hitbox. So basically we're going to set our state to state punch. We're going to make our hitbox. We're going to set our image index to 0 so that we animate properly. Alright, attack cancel. Basically what happens is there are some cases where the big guy might get hurt in the middle of the attack, and we don't want him to attack when his attack animation is interrupted. So we're just going to memorize what hitbox he's using and then delete that hitbox. Easy as that. I didn't delete this variable earlier, did I? Yeah, no, it's still here. So as you can see, that takes care of our hitbox. Alright, attack connected. This doesn't do anything. So yeah. Let's see. Alright. Our gravity, 0.5. Our vertical range, 15. My z plus equals zsp, and then y is equal to my z. So basically, this is all just very simple movement code stuff, right? I'm going to change this to bbox underscore bottom. Good. So basically what this does is this allows us to face the player. Wait, no. Yeah. This faces the player, so this tells us, okay, like, is the player to our left or to our right? This tells us, okay, is the player above us or below us? Invincibility timer. This just makes sure that our invincibility timer always runs out so that we can get hit again. Okay. Next, our state machine. This is the most important part. So, waiting state. All we're going to do is we're going to check if the camera is locked in place and if we are inside the camera, then we're going to activate. Simple stuff. Idle. So, as you can tell, idle. We go to the idle sprite. We stop moving. HSP and VSP are 0. Our Z is 0, so we stay on the floor. Our idle timer decreases so that we eventually leave this state. And then, if our idle timer is less than or equal to 0, basically what we do is we check what attack to use, we're supposed to use, and then we go ahead and use that attack. So if attack to use is whirlwind, then we go to the whirl prep state. If basic attack, then we go to the walk state, which this basically goes to punching. And jump, then we do the jump up attack, and we'll cover what that is later. And then we're also going to reset our timer. So that's the idle timer. Fall hit ground. Set the sprite to what it needs to be. HSP divided by friction. So this will just make sure that we slow down to a stop. And then if we finish, when we finish this, we're just going to lay down. Alright. Hurt. Slow down to a stop. Get hurt. When we're done, go to the idle state. Jump prep. So what this does is generally when you're making a boss, it's good to give them some anticipation frames. Anticipation frames basically mean like the frames before the enemy attacks so that we're able to see, oh, the enemy is about to attack. So in this case, as you can see here, if we go back to what the sprite is, jump prep. So as you can see, he's looking up, he's crouching down. This is the signal to the player, oh, the boss is about to jump up. I can rush in and get a few hits in. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to jump up. Then, remember how we got here. So we got here from the idle state. We got here because attack to use was jump at some point, right? Well, now that we're here, what we're going to do is we're going to change our attack to use. So that the next time we're in the idle state, we choose an attack. Now, I didn't want our boss to go straight to the same attack after just doing it. So what I did is now the boss randomly picks between the basic attack or whirlwind. The jump up attack is not an option here because we know, okay, we're in the jump prep state. That means this attack that we're currently using is jump prep, and that means we want to exclude the jump up from the possible next attack to use. So that's how that works. All right, jump up. So this is this state. Basically, I made two states, one for animating as the enemy goes up, and then 1 for animating as the character comes down. So as you can see, my z minus equal up speed, all that stuff. And as soon as we're above negative room height, so if you remember, our camera is clamped to the room height, so we want to make sure that we're all the way off the camera, and then we can come back down. And then what we're going to do here is we are going to snap exactly to the player's position, which will ensure that, you know, we slam down right on top of the player. I include a -1 here because if you remember, our X scale depends on where the player is. So if we're exactly at the player's X, then our X scale is going to be 0, and it'll just cause some problems later. So I changed it by just setting it slightly off, 1 pixel off, so that way it didn't cause any problems with this code that we have up here, player_deer. Makes sense. All right, slam down. So slam down sprite. We shouldn't be moving left or right here, so we're just going to have that. And then my z. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to decrease my z until it's 0. I say decrease. Yeah, technically it's increase because my z would be a negative number at this point. But we're just calling it. Technically, what will visually happen is that the big guy will come down onto us. So that's all that. All right, my z is equal to 0. So if we have reached the floor, then what we're going to do is we're going to stand up. And the next thing we need to do is we actually need to make our hitbox. So if you remember, SCR make hitbox, obj_player. And then if you imported the damage sprites, we should be able to use, let me see, which was it? SBR_big guy. Should be slam down hitbox. Yeah, slam hitbox right here. I know I don't have it over here. I think it's somewhere else. Should be like hitboxes. Yeah, okay, they're both here. That's my bad. But they should come with the new download sprites for this tutorial. So I'll make sure that that gets in there. If not, you can just make the hitbox. I completely plan on you just taking this video as an example of how I do it and then applying it to whatever boss that you want to do it. So you don't necessarily have to follow this one for one. This is just an example of how I do it to hopefully help you understand, okay, this is how I can make bosses for my beat 'em up game. Easy as that. Alright, laying. So this happens if the big guy lands flat on his back for some reason. Basically, once his animation is finished, he stands back up. And then he either chooses a whirlwind or jump attack. So, easy as that. Punch. Player punches. Basically what happens is when the player is in the walk state, the big guy will walk to the player, punch him by going to the punch state, and then go back to the walk state. So it's kind of like the walk state and the punch state are combined. Alright, stand up. So if this enemy has fallen down or has just finished a slam down attack, they are just going to stand up. Alright, walk. So, walk, state, easy as that. Image X scale is equal to player dir. HSP is equal to player dir. So basically what this says is look at the player, move towards the player, and then this is a countdown to using our basic attack. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to check, okay, how far away are we on the x-axis and how far away are we on the y-axis? So if we're in the vertical range, remember that variable we set up before, that means that we're in range to punch the player on the y-axis. If we're in range on the x-axis, we can stop on the x-axis. We can stop moving horizontally because the player is within range. This number I just set to 85. I didn't set up a fancy variable for this. You don't really need one, but it's nice to have one. All right, leave state. So basically, this timer is keeping track of how much time we spend doing this basic walking state. What we're going to do is once it's less than or equal to 0, we're going to reset our timer. We're going to reset our animation. We're going to go to the idle state, and we're going to choose the whirlwind or the jump state. Notice again how we don't change the basic attack state. We don't have the option to choose the basic attack state from inside the state because we want to make sure that the same attack doesn't play twice in a row. All right, so this is us leaving the state if we've basically run out of time to do this. This is us leaving the state if it is time for, if we are within range of the player. So player is now within range, stop moving, set my sprite to idle, punch timer minus minus. So basically this allows us to just stand still next to the player for a few seconds. Then what we're going to do is we are going to attack the player. Remember this script that we set up earlier. We're going to say our current state is the punch state. Our image index is equal to 0. We're going to reset the animation here again. And then punch timer is equal to punch timer max. So this will reset for the next time we punch. Easy as that. All right, whirl prep. So this is for the whirlwind state. So this is the very first part, and we have to prep some things. So the same thing with the slam down. We want to give the player a bit of a warning animation. And in that case, this warning animation looks like this. As you can see, the big guy is crouched down, but he's looking to the side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to wait for that animation to be done. We're going to reset our animation. We're going to go to the whirlwind state, and we're going to make the whirlwind hitbox. So something we need to remember about hitboxes. These hitboxes, when they finish their animation, they are destroyed. Now, what we could have done is we could make sure that this whirlwind hitbox, it lasts as long as our whirlwind attack does. However, I didn't want to make all the frames of animation for that, especially because the whirlwind hitbox is supposed to be invisible. And I want to be able to come back and change how long this whirlwind state lasts if I feel like it later. So here's what I did. Let's go to our whirlwind hitbox. And as you can see, up here, the animation, frames per second, I've set it to 0 frames per second. And if we play this animation, you can see this line where it shows like what animation frame we're on is not moving. So basically what we've done is we've turned off animation for this hitbox. That means that this hitbox is not going to automatically delete itself, which is very, very good. So basically what we want to do is we want to hold on to this whirlwind hitbox. We're going to want to hold on to the hitbox ID from when we create it. And then we're going to want to destroy it manually. Remember, because it's no longer animating, it is no longer going to delete itself automatically. So we want to delete it once we're done with our whirlwind attack. Alright, as you can see, the future attack to use, we do not choose the whirlwind attack because we don't want the same move to run twice in a row. Easy as that. Alright, whirl direction. So we're going to choose a random direction. We're going to set our HSP and VSP to 2 times our speed in that direction. And then we're going to set last x equal to x. So basically what we do here is I want the enemy to face, we don't want the enemy to face the same way. We don't want the enemy to face towards the player. We want the enemy to face where he's going. So this will check our last x on our last frame. And then we're going from that get our x scale. So if we should be facing left or right, basically. So we're basically going to check like, okay, was the last x we checked to our left or to our right? In which case, if it was to our left, we should probably face right. And if it was to our right, we should probably face left. That's how that works. All right, whirlwind. Now we're going to this state. So we set the appropriate animation. We start ticking down our whirlwind timer. So with our whirlwind hitbox, we want to make sure that it's our same x and y. Remember that these things generally don't move on their own. So we're going to want to make sure that stays with us. Bounce off floors and walls. So basically what I've done here is this is going to check So remember, when we're trapped in a wave, our screen is trapped with us. So we want this enemy to basically bounce off the walls of our screen, right? Well, how we do that is first, we are going to clamp our X between the back bounds and the front bounds. And then we're going to round. So this floor basically floors clamped X below. Sorry, that was really confusing. This floor basically rounds our number so that, like if it's like 16.9, floor makes it 16, right? So that's how that works. And what we're going to do is we're going to round this number so that we don't have to deal with pesky decimals. And basically what we're going to do is, okay, if clamped X is equal to the back bounds, then we're touching the left wall and we need to bounce off it. So ceiling basically does the same as floor but rounds up. So if we have 16.1, it would round this number to 17. And it's going to do the same for the front bounds. So basically, we don't want to deal with the decimals. So if we are touching the left wall, or, this is or, remember, we're touching the right bounds, then what we're going to do is we're going to multiply HSP by -1. So that will basically bounce us backwards. And then if y is equal to the top or bottom, we're going to multiply our vertical speed by -1. So that will just flip us around, right? So that gives us our sort of like bouncy effect. So I've kind of complicated math there, but hopefully you understand it. All right, face the right direction. As I said before, we're going to check. We're going to first make sure that our last x is not equal to our x. And if so, we're going to get our sign, and we're going to set our image x scale of that. And then we're going to update our last x. That makes sure that we face the direction we're moving in. All right, our whirlwind timer has expired. That means we go to the whirl end state. And this state, I just wanted to give a just short second where the enemy has finished. So as you can see, whirl end is the same sprite as whirl prep. You could change it later if you want to. Basically what we're going to do is, if our whirlwind hitbox still exists, delete that thing. We're going to slow down to a stop. And once our animation in this state is finished, we can just go back to the idle state again. Alright, big states.die. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to use the falling on the ground state. And then once this animation is finished, we're going to go to the dead state. And basically what this does is we're going to lay on the floor for a little bit of time. And then we're going to destroy ourselves. And that will just, that'll be the end of the boss fight. Easy as that. Alright, next down here. X plus equals HSP. Y plus equals VSP. So on and so forth. We're going to clamp our Y between the top and bottom bounds, and we're going to clamp our X between the back bounds and the front bounds. Also, this doesn't apply if we're in the waiting state. And you may be thinking like, okay, Gatsby, you hardly spend any time in the waiting state. What's the point of this? Well, in my game, what I have is I have the boss sitting somewhere. So I've set it up slightly different in this project than my main project, but basically the idea is if you want this boss to stay in the background and then animate in, what you can do instead of what I've done here is go from the waiting state to the enter scene state, play a little animation, and then go into the idle state. And that's how I do it in my main project. However, this project is much more simple, so this if statement technically is not necessary at all. But this will basically just make it that when the boss is waiting, basically when he's just doing nothing, he won't get clamped into the view. Alright, animation finished is equal to false. Same thing that we have in all of our other projects. Alright, draw. This should be very similar to the draw code in our other objects. So, color, alpha, sprite, sprite index, image index, x plus anim x, y plus anim y, X scale, Y scale, angle, blend, and alpha. Good. Alright, animation end. Animation finished is true. Perfect. So, all of that is done. So how do we set this up? Well, what I've got here is on the instances layer. I just grabbed our big guy, and I put him here. As you can see, everything should work. I also put a wave starter from the last video that will actually allow our wave to start. Also, I didn't go over this, but basically you can make sure that you can click here and you can set this sprite to our idle state. Actually, we should probably set the collision mask as sprites. Wait, no. Mine is here. We should probably set this to our idle state, just to keep things consistent. Walk state works too. Alright, perfect. Everything is in. So, that should be everything we have for our big guy. If we run the game, we should see some stuff happen. So, as soon as we walk across the threshold, the boss is spawned in. As you can see, he's doing his bossy thing. He's trying to hit us. He's doing his whirlwind stuff. And he should cycle between attacks randomly. So, as you can see, I've left myself a message. So, we need to take care of something that is set up in our objects. So, what we've done is we have created 2 new types of damage for this enemy. However, we need to edit those types because right now we didn't set up the damage type properly. So, how do we do that? Well, let's go back to our hitbox object. So, if you remember how this works, I know it's been a little while. What we've done is whatever hitbox we use, we log the damage type, and then that damage type is passed to whatever target object we are hurting. So, as you can probably guess, we need to set up some new stuff for that. So, remember we added the SPR underscore big guy underscore punch hitbox. Perfect. So we added the punch hitbox. This one can just use the same damage type as the punch. No need to reinvent the wheel. Whirlwind hitbox. So as you can see, this is my show message telling me I didn't set that up. So we could go ahead and set a new damage type. We'll just say, oh, I don't know, whirlwind. And we also need to set up slam. Alright, that's all we have to do in the hitbox. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to run this game, and everything should work now. However, we should get a little message. So, he's going to attack. We look towards him. Basically, stuff happens. So, as you can see, we get hurt there. If we punch, we can hurt him as well. I'll have to show you now. Nope. He's still doing his thing. Alright, so as you can see, punch, punch, punch. He falls over. All that good stuff. Now, you may notice that we didn't react yet to the whirlwind attack. And we also don't react to the slam down effect. Wow, thank you, boss. That was like a perfect example of what I was saying. We do react to the punch state. So what we need to do is we need to go to our player. We actually need to edit the code. So we need to go down to our get hurt. Now if we open up our program here. Oh, it's not in here. My bad. Basically what I do is, let me show you something real quick. Default. So this will show us if a damage type is not set and what object it's not set in. So we can go ahead and copy and paste that in. So then, we should be able to see if we take damage now. 1 second, I'm very sorry. We have to take this damage type. There we go. Okay, now that's working. So this here will show us a message in our output window. when we take damage, that isn't set. So as you can see, if we open up our thing, as you can see, now it's telling us this message. So damage type whirlwind has not been set before reading it in OBJ player. So basically, that's a very helpful way of telling us like, oh, that damage type does not have a damage type. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this, paste here. Going to copy this, paste there. All right, perfect. Now we actually have a damage type for whirlwind. So now we won't get any more errors about that. And then we can also do the same with slam. So in here, you can, of course, change everything to your liking. This one right now is the same as thrown, so it'll be the same as being thrown by this enemy. But yeah, pretty basic stuff. So let's go ahead and add in the other damage type, and I can show you how it works in action. Alright, so I had a little bit of an issue with my recording. But as you can see, we have set up this whirlwind damage type in the player, and we have set up the slam damage type. To me, I basically set this up the same as the thrown damage type. But you can come in here and edit all you want. So like you can, I don't know, raise this number by 10 or whatever, I don't know. Whatever you want to do. Just play with it and figure it out. Find out what fits best for your game. And then what we're going to do is, as you can see, we get hit by the whirlwind. Next, we get hit by the fist. Easy as that. And then if he actually does the other one, there it is, we'll actually get hit by the slam down. So that should be all the attacks that he is able to do. We all take damage. We take damage, we give damage, and it should be as easy as that. So I hope this has answered your question about how to make a boss in a beat 'em up game. This is very simple stuff. Just remember, state machines, make sure that they have all the animations you need. And yeah, so if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. I'll make sure to keep the GitHub updated so that it's good and usable for all of you. And then please do let me know what I should add, if anything, to this tutorial next. I really do think that this could be a fine stopping point. I think we've seen all of the important pieces for a beat 'em up, except maybe like the UI and stuff, but there's plenty of tutorials for UI and things. But let me know if you want me to continue this series. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely evening.